a few different indicators of cultures and how to work with cultures, okay? So the first thing I'd like you to see is the following, which is basically a this is the first researcher called Geert Hofstede that he published his research in the 1970s. He worked in IBM for a very, very long time, and he conducted over there a research in a few good dozen companies for over 30 years, and he came up with this index, okay? He says that this is an index for understanding culture, also for researching it and also for understanding. So what does it mean? Power distance index, okay? What does that mean? They have a culture that might have a very high power distance index, okay? Which means that, for instance, if I'm the boss, there's a huge difference between me and my employees, okay? Versus power differences which are low, okay? That it's maybe, you can tell me if that maybe relates, or where is your organizational culture on this scope, to how flat an organization can be, or how kind of tall it can be with a power distance. Okay, does that resonate? Please stop me if I'm going too fast, if something is unclear, okay? Afterwards, Hofstede says that you have, yeah,
sorry,
go ahead.
Do you, like the distance between an employee and his boss, or the CEO and the last of the employees?
Everything. It's the gaps, the differences and the distances between the different people within an organization or a culture, okay? So I said, for me, basically Geert Hofstede made this research about national cultures. I don't believe that culture is a national thing only, okay? I believe that at the end of the day also, me and my sister, for instance, that were born and raised in similar places and lived in the same house, at the end of the day, her individual culture is extremely different than my individual culture, okay? Like Lital.
Can I give an example?
Sure.
If you have in mind an organizational structure, the more managerial levels you have, it means that in order to take a decision or to get an approval or to share knowledge, you need to go through more
barriers,
more layers. Yes, so it defines. Okay, the structure defines the knowledge sharing, what's right, what's wrong. Okay, should I, as a manager, speak with my subordinate employees? Okay, if I'm, for instance, a department manager and I have a team leader underneath, should I speak with his employees or not? Okay, so the more layers you have, the more formal and structural the culture is. Yeah, is that what you?
Yeah. Does that make sense? Does that explain it? Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right, so I'd like to go through this. Then you also have the individuality versus the collectivism, okay? Is it important in the culture to be an individual? I live according to what I believe to and work the way I think I ought to work. Also, if it comes on account of not being part of the group, part of the organization, okay? How important is it to be an individual versus how important is it to be a collective? Then you have masculinity versus femininity, also in the case study, right? And it's not always a matter also of men and women, but it's also a macho culture. Is it okay to make mistakes? When I'm sad and I come to work or I have a Zoom meeting, can I cry? How intimate are we supposed to be? Okay? How important are the soft skills versus the maybe the harder skills? Okay? And then you have uncertainty avoidance index, okay? Where do you take huge risks, okay? Think about maybe Israeli culture versus where do you kind of avoid taking risks, okay? Maybe living in, if we're going cliche-wise, maybe Johanna in Scandinavia. Do you think life has less risks as a uncertainty avoidance place?
Sweden is a very conformist society. They have very low risk.
Okay. Very low risk. Okay. Okay. And then you have long-term versus short-term. Okay. I lived in Paris. I remember I had one day a meeting near a house of a friend. I called her and told her, hey, I have tomorrow a meeting. Maybe we'll grab a coffee when I'm done. She's like, tomorrow? Wait, I need to check in my calendar. Let's it for 3 weeks ahead. And I'm like, no, tomorrow I'm going to be there, okay? Long term, for her, it was inconceivable to plan something from today to tomorrow. Okay, that's a cultural thing. I was stunned. I'm like, why don't you understand? I'm like, tomorrow I'm going to be there. I didn't tell her that. It took me time to understand that, like being French, you need the calendar, right? Indulgence versus restraint, okay? How restraint and held up is a culture, or the opposite, okay? Now, Gear, it's important for me to show you this because this is the beginning and the base, all right? We'll continue from here because later there were other researchers that added many, many more things to the index. We're not going to go through everything. It's just important for you to see so you can map these different components of culture, okay? And I'd like to focus now on how I view culture as being a cross-culturalist working in this field for over a decade. What is culture? For me, culture is a human operating system, okay? What I mean by that is that it defines everything. It defines what is right and what is wrong, what is good and what is bad, how you say hello, how you say goodbye. What is honesty, right? Johanna, I think you mentioned before in the discussion that maybe John, the American partner, wasn't honest, okay? How do you even read what's honesty, right? What is shame, right? Humans experience shame in every culture, but what leads you to shame is different in every culture, including the harakiri in Japan, in which you will also kill yourself. It's better to die than to be ashamed of a deed that you've done, okay? So try